A winning culture attracts top talent, it keeps teams engaged, and it fuels long-term success. But how do we actually create it? Now, in this episode, we're going to pull back the curtain on the culture strategies behind one of the largest FASTSIGNS franchisees in their system.
Welcome to Fordify Live with your host, Saeks.
Today, I'm joined by Todd Helfer. He's a leading franchisee at FASTSIGNS Jacksonville. He's running the largest FASTSIGNS west of Texas, and he's the third largest franchisee in their system. Now, Todd's journey is anything but traditional. After dropping out of college as a freshman, he built a thriving business by focusing on culture, leadership, and smart scaling strategies. Todd, welcome to the show. So take us back to the beginning. How did you get your start in franchising?
I've been in the sign business pretty much my whole life. My parents were in the sign business, and once I dipped my toe into college and realized that wasn't for me, I went to work for my mom and in the FASTSIGNS network, and eventually we bought my own store back in 2017, and here we are.
All right, so you got into franchising. And, you know, for those people watching today, we're live right now on Facebook, LinkedIn, and YouTube, and a few other places. And the audio from this becomes the Business Growth Show podcast. And so, you know, I interview franchisors and franchisees and entrepreneurs and business owners and executives of all sizes. And so I'm really interested in the lessons that you've learned along the way on how to create a culture. Because, you know, to grow, you had to create a great culture, right? So thinking back, what are some of the challenges you faced along the way in growing the franchisee, the brand that you have now?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, there's challenges at every stage, right? You know, we started first year, we were a real small store, and the owner does everything, right? So it's sales, production, graphic design, installation. You can't afford to hire talent, right? And
Right.
So you just do it yourself. So that's the first challenge. You got to get over that hurdle, and then once you have enough revenue, you can start hiring talent and developing that culture. And it's culture. It sounds cliche, but it is culture above everything. It doesn't matter how talented you are. If you're the best sales guy, if you're the best graphic designer, if you're the best project manager, if you don't fit in our culture, it's a hard line, right? And developing that culture over time is difficult. But it's just, you surround yourself with the people you want to be at work with, and if you can surround yourself with people that are smarter than you and do things differently than you and make you look in different areas, and believe all in the same goal and how to get here. I think that's the main thing.
All right. So when you think about the employees, so how many employees do you have now? How many locations do you have now? Is it 3 or?
We just have one.
The one,
yeah,
okay,
just
I'm
one.
thinking the third largest.
Yep.
Sorry. So you have one location in Jacksonville, but it's the third largest out of like 750 units, right?
Right. Yeah.
So you're obviously doing you're award winning. I saw some things on LinkedIn before the show. I'm like, let me see who this guest is.
Yeah.
So if you tuned in late, we're talking to Todd Helfer. He's a leading franchisee of FASTSIGNS, one of the third largest of 750 units. So we're talking today about culture, and those are one of those words that gets thrown around a lot, right? And I know for me, I mean, I've had 17 different companies, 3 were 8-figure. I've certainly gone through my challenges along the way where I hired people who I thought were really good. They interviewed well, they had a great resume, but they just flat out sucked. Pardon me, that's a technical term. It's my show, I can say that. But me, and I always had to ask myself, did I hire wrong or did I lead him wrong? And in the beginning, for me, Todd, I wasn't a good leader. I think I had some really good people and I lost them because I didn't lead them effectively. And I know I still have challenges even as I, grow my business today. So once you have your stuff figured out, How are you? What are some things that you're doing that you could share with our listeners to help ensure that you select the right candidates for the positions on your team?
But you have to be willing to admit a mistake, right? So fire fast if it's not the right hire, right? And I mean, to develop the right talent, like you said, I always blame myself first, right? So whether it's a middle management problem, a upper management problem, at the end of the day, it's my problem, right? Whether what did I not do to provide that? Why is that person failing, right? I feel like a lot of owners and a lot of CEOs place blame on other people, right? And I'm not saying that there's not blame to be placed, but at the end of the day, it's all my problem. And what are we doing to provide the right people the opportunity and the tools for them to do the best of their ability and to do their job, better than I can do their job, right? And at the end of the day, that's my responsibility to provide tools for my people to do their job at an elite level. And not every hire works out perfectly, and I feel like a lot of our success comes from the ability to find what my employees' skill sets and where they are, what they're really, really good at, whether that's what I hired them for, whether that's what they interviewed for. Most people have a skill set, right? That is going to be onboarded in our company. They're not going to get to this level without having a skill set. Whether we misjudge that skill set, let's find what you're excellent at and put it to work, and let me provide the tools and put you in the position to succeed. And that provides two things. It provides growth for the employee, and it also provides the company a skill set that we didn't know that we might needed, right? And once we discover that, it's we just, instead of fighting that position, we amplify that position.
Yeah. So hire slow, fire fast. Do you guys use any assessments when you're in the pre-qualifying stage to help identify the personality style?
We don't. I used to, and I'm probably in the minority in this. And I'm not saying that I'm right in this. I obviously my corporate headquarters, they suggest that we do it, and I've done it in the past. To me, the interview and looking somebody in the eye and is more important than that, right? So has it caused us issues in the past of bringing the wrong person on at the wrong level, or the wrong, they say they're a leader, but they're not, or they are a leader and they say they're not, like a lot of people don't know what they are necessarily. And I understand that those McQuaig tests, and there's a whole bunch of them out there, right? So I'm not saying don't use them. I'm just saying I haven't personally used them. Our typical onboarding process is the manager of that department will interview them. If it gets to a certain level, I'll interview them, and then if it's depending on the level of what they're applying for, I also have a business coach that will interview them as well.
Yeah, and I think that that's really the key. I mean, even assessments, I think they're a tool. They're not a replacement, right? I mean, it'll help weed out the first people. I know that, one of the things we're using right now, we're using a lot of AI to help write effective job descriptions, write the interview questions. And, if we're hiring someone for sales, we're using AI to help conversational AI to train up to speed. So they get a chance to learn how, whether it's customer experience or customer service or sales, they're able to have conversations with an AI as a simulation to a real customer. That way they're not cutting their teeth on a real customer, right? So it saves our brand, because I run a couple different companies. And I think that, if you've grown to the level you are with the volume you have, you did a couple things right. I mean, you took care of the customers, obviously. You built centers of influence in Jacksonville and in your area. And then you were able to build a strong team by leading by example. And I think that for the listeners today, one of the things that Todd's talking about here is take personal accountability for your own success. I know that in franchising, as a keynote speaker, I go and I speak to franchise brands and I speak at their annual conferences and things. And, the two things that the franchisor always says, we want our franchisees to follow the systems. And as a franchisee, you want your employees to follow your systems, right? And the franchisee is always like, well, can you do more to drive business? And one of the things that you've done is you've taken personal accountability for the Jacksonville area by outreach and building those relationships and growing that volume. And then, of course, taking care of the customer, because, I always say all the marketing in the world won't overcome a bad customer experience. What are some things that you're doing with your customers to ensure a wow experience with FASTSIGNS? Because there's a lot of competition growing all the time in your industry.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, it's a very competitive market, very competitive business. We try to focus on the small things. I went to a conference many years ago, and one little line as a keynote speaker, you probably understand that you're just looking to take one thing away from those, and one thing really stuck with me. And there was a gentleman that worked for Disney, and they always tried to create little moments of wow, right? So that is one thing that we pride ourselves on, and just try to create little moments of wow throughout the process, whether that's in the proposal process, whether that's in the graphic design process, or the production process, or the installation. Constant communication, over communicate with the client, and that in tune takes care of most of the stuff that's going to go bad, right? At the end of the day, we're making signs. We're not saving people's lives. We're not yes, there are emergencies and deadlines and things that we have to get done. And I understand all of that. And so does our team. But at the end of the day, if you communicate and you're upfront, and you're not backtracking, you're upfront with issues, because they happen, like supply chain issues, installation issues. We're not perfect. We mess up, but as long as you're over communicating, and if you think you're communicating enough, I tell my sales guys, if you think you're over communicating with the customer, if you think you're bothering the customer, you're probably communicating at the right level.
Yeah, I would agree with that. I mean, it's been, with my businesses, I've had service businesses, I've had retail stores, and obviously as a manufacturer sold through a lot of different distribution channels. And, I always say that deals don't happen before dialogue. So you have to communicate. And then, it's interesting when I do sales training for organizations, because they'll bring me in to say, hey, we want to increase our outside sales or inside sales. And I'll look at their metrics of how many calls they make a week per day, or how many outreaches they do. And usually it's way lower than what it should be or what it could be, but they think they're really busy, right? Because they're busy. And I always tell them, are you busy or are you productive? Like, I don't care if you're busy. It's, are you producing the results you want? And I think that, when it comes to customer experience, over communication is such a challenge. I mean, I have a digital marketing agency, so I run two businesses. I have my speaking business, and then I have the agency. And on the digital side, it's getting my team to be proactive, and they're pretty good at it. I'm not, but bashing my own team, but I'm saying it's always a challenge to have them be proactive when someone's got a project. My goal is every client needs to know what the expectation is, what the next action step is, so they don't have to ask us, hey, what's going on with my project? And of course, in the name FASTSIGNS, it's what it's all about. I just recently got back from the International Franchise Association. I was exhibiting there, and I met, some of the leadership for the franchisor. Everybody listening, Todd's a franchisee, not the franchisor, so full transparency there. And but I wanted a sign with all the logos of the organizations I spoke to, and I've worked with my local FASTSIGNS here in Wichita, Kansas, 24 times, right? And so I called them up and I said, hey, I need a sign. I need it to be on the Plex material. They knew what it was called. I didn't know. I said, so I can put Velcro on it and put it on the front of my trade show booth. And they said, great, send it over. And in like 3 days, I got the sign. It was able to go in my trade show booth, and it looked great in my booth. And even the franchise, one of the leadership in FASTSIGNS walked by, and I said, hey, that sign was by FASTSIGNS. Says, hey, thanks for being a customer. But I know there's a lot of competition in that market because I've spoken to some of those companies. But what I like is FASTSIGNS really provides great quality. The local franchisee cares. He treats it as if it's his business because it is his business. He's not just relying on the national brand to do the advertising. He's out building relationships like you have been, obviously, because you're award winning in the group. And so I think that the listeners here really need to understand is how well are you communicating to your customers? How well have you looked at the touch points across the board? I mean, I always look at, I spoke at a bank, and they had a bank association. They had 650 people in the audience. And I said, how many employees do you have? And they said 95. And I said, how many in marketing? And they said 3. And I said, no, you've got 95, because any touch point you have with a customer is part of marketing, right? Would you agree?
Oh, 100%. I mean, like a perfect example in our business is our installers, right? So our installers are, they're out, they're getting dirty, they have a hard job. We work in the Florida heat. There's nothing easy about, welding in the sun and putting signs up and being on lifts, and there's nothing easy about that. But a lot of times they're the only face that our end client sees other than the salesperson at the beginning of the project.
Right.
So, they are such a huge role in who we are and in the outcome of how the customer feels about us, because, they might be dirty and looking like they're construction workers and in the field, but a lot of our clients are so excited for that new monument sign or for whatever they ordered, right? And they're there, waiting for us to be done, and they're excited when we come. So we send text messages when our installers are on the way, and we give our installers kudos and bonuses, and really heavy on and how they act and being polite, and really they're not just there to install the sign. They're there to put a bow on your project and to really set us apart as a professional partner versus a construction worker sign company.
Yeah, I think that's so important. I mean, again, you didn't grow to be that successful without instilling that through that. And our episode today has really been about culture. And it really is. How do you create a culture of accountability, a culture of where people care and where they feel supported? And so obviously you're doing things with your team to make sure you're not just saying, hey, I want you to care about the customer, but it becomes acceptable behavior and not acceptable behavior, right? So that way, if you create a culture where that's so strong, if you've got someone who's not really fitting in, they stand out like a sore thumb, and then they're either going to get with the program or they're going to be freed up for new opportunities to go work somewhere else because it's not a good fit. And for me, that's one of the hardest things over the years is I had people that were really smart, really talented, but they were just hard to get along with, and they rubbed the customers the wrong way. And I felt really bad having to, I tried to coach them up to standard or free them up. Right. So if you have an issue, you either coach them up to standard, help them create the environment, the tools. Maybe it's a training thing, or maybe it's just a communication thing. And then if they're not really a good fit, like you said, it's time to free them up. I know for me, I held on to employees sometimes way too long because as an entrepreneur, people gave me chances. So I always wanted to give them chances. So I'd always try to build them up and to help them. And then, I had to learn that was not my role, that, it's not a charity, it's a for-profit entity, and I need to add value. So looking back over your growth, and how many years have you been growing now?
I mean, we for the past 10 years, we've had about 8 years, we've had really substantial growth.
So looking back on those 8 years of growth. Now, for those of you listening, this is confidential. This is just for the listeners that are here. This is for educational and informational purposes only. We're not giving anybody legal advice or suggesting you do or do not do what we're talking about. But I'm just curious, Todd, what is something that you thought was a really good idea that maybe turned out to be a fumble that taught you a big lesson, hypothetically?
Well, that's a good question. I mean, learning from your mistakes I do that a lot. I would say that the majority of everything that I'm good at is because I messed it up at some point. But one big thing is I tried to hire a sales manager early on. I got a team of 4 outside sales professionals that are all, industry leading. They're all top of FASTSIGNS network. That was not a good hire. That was not a good idea. I'm a natural salesman, and I still we have a full blown leadership team, but I still manage the sales team because without revenue, we're nothing, right? So trying to hand that off at the stage of business that we were at, it was not the right call.
Yeah, I can feel your pain. I mean, as a keynote speaker, my fees aren't cheap. People can Google it and know what I charge. So I thought, well, I'm going to hire a salesperson to reach out to, brands and associations to inquire whether they hire speakers, and then, send them my books. And so I had this whole plan worked out that some of my other buddies did. And man, I probably spent over a year and a half, $250,000 on trying to develop salespeople to go out and do that. And what I found was, they talked a good game, but they weren't great. In fact, I had one that I thought was really promising, and they hadn't done anything for 90 days. They hadn't really moved the needles. And I know how long, there's a learning curve. If someone happens at a conference in October, they don't hire me today. They interview 6 or 7 speakers, and I know how the deal works. But I went to her and I said, Brandy, hypothetically, her name was Brandy. I said, Brandy, what's going on here? And she said, well, I just don't understand how you can go out and do 2 keynotes and make more than I make in a year. And I said, well, that's your base salary. You get, 15%. If you sold a couple deals, you're going to make a lot more money. So it was interesting that their perspective, what stopped her was her comparing my value, it's like my salary to what, instead of, how could she help organizations and what is the impact I can make? So it was just a mindset thing. And so, for me, my accelerated growth system is really 3 parts. It's mindset, strategies, and tactics. And I've learned over the years for culture, I have to hire people that are coachable and open-minded and that are willing to accept corrective criticism. If they're not coachable, that's the first thing I look at during an interview process is this person open-minded and coachable? And I can just listen to their language patterns to understand whether they're trying to convince me that they're really good. And I don't mind, effort is good. And, a new broom sweeps clean. For me, Todd, I could, when someone asks me how well they're doing, it's like, come back and ask me in 6 months. Like, until I get a chance to see how you actually interact and how you solve problems and if you're a critical thinker. And not every role needs that. I mean, I realize certain roles need certain skill sets, but what is something that you'd share with our listeners? We're going to wrap up here in a little bit here, but what is something that you've done now with your culture to really ensure that you are staying at a high level? Like, how are you doing any performance reviews, or do you how do you do it instinctively to know, okay, this person needs corrective coaching or they need to be freed up?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, so the main thing with our culture is we have, yes, to answer your question, yes, we do accountability reviews. We actually just switched this year to do them. We were doing them once a year. We just switched to do them twice a year, just so they're not so drawn out, right? And like we used to do them, like, where you almost every time you did one, you would get a raise, right? But like
Right.
now it's more about, what can we do to strive to get better in smaller windows, right? There's no need to wait for 12 months. And I would say one thing for really successful self-starters, it's hard to get over, well, I can do it, why can't you? Right. And
I've learned that lesson the hard way.
Yeah, it is. It's one of the hardest pills I've had to swallow and figure out as I've grown the business. And I apply a lot to the 140 rule, right? So if you can hire 100% of you, why would you hire you? Why would that person work for you? Why wouldn't they just do what you're doing? But if you can hire 2 people that are 70% of you, that's 140, right? So like that's better than 100. So realizing that and taking that accountability on yourself and realizing that you're not going to hire somebody that you're just going to plug in and they're just going to go, is really, it goes back to the accountability of who you are as a leader, right? And then as far as culture, I mean, yeah, we do all the cliche things, right? We do team building. We celebrate successes. If we have a largest revenue month or quarter, or if we got customer service awards, or a whole bunch of things. We pride ourselves on, because we're hard on our employees. Not hard, I mean, we expect a lot out of our employees, right? So if you expect a lot, you have to show gratitude, right? And you have to celebrate wins. And celebrating wins is a big part of what we do. And we really get along. At the end of the day, we're not a huge company. We got, I think 24 employees. So we're still a tight-knit group, and we spend a lot of time together. So liking each other is a huge part of that, right? And that's another challenge as you grow and you don't know everybody as well as you used to know everybody. And but one thing that I thought, culture is not ping pong tables or foosball tables or words written on a wall, of who we are. And it's crazy. One thing is, like, one of my goals this year, I still don't have a vision board. Like, I don't have vision of, company values, right? Because I never wanted it to be words on a wall, right? I just wasn't comfortable enough. And like we just kept growing and growing and growing. And yes, we have values. And yes, I need to put those into place and, you know, and get people to buy into that, but they already buy in without the words on the wall. Right. So I feel like a lot of people put words on the wall and be like, this is who we are. Like it's actions. It's actions and the people you surround yourself with.
Yeah, I think that's a great place to leave it. It's actions and the people you surround yourself with. And I know for me, I mean, I've had the posters, the vision, mission, and values, and you know, I did it to pick a North Star so we could focus. But I'm with you. Just having it without the right people and the right mindset meant nothing, right?
100%. Yeah.
All right. Well, you've been listening to Todd Helfer. He's the leading franchisee of Fast Signs Jacksonville. Stick around after the end here. But Todd, thanks so much for doing this episode today.
Yeah, I appreciate it. It was fun.
Thank you for tuning in to Fordify Live. Make sure to like, comment, and share this episode on your favorite social media platform. And don't forget to subscribe to the Business Growth Show podcast, available wherever you get your podcast streaming fix. We air weekly at 11 a.m. Central Time. So until next week, keep pushing the boundaries and never stop growing.